Bushido.
Samurai spirit. A Japanese word is explaining what it means. Let's see what it is through some episodes.
正々堂々
The way of life to be always fair and square without shaming oneself against anybody else in the god. Kenshin Uesugi, supply salt to enemy. In Japanese history, the end of the 15th century to the end of the 16th century is called the Warring States period. In Japan at that time, the central government called the Muromachi Shogunate ruled the daimyo, that means governor of each region. However, due to the weakening of the Muromachi Shogunate, the governance became unstable, and armed clashes by the warring lords of each region occurred, that is, a state of civil war. In such an age, in 1567 Sengoku daimyo Takeda Shingon in Kai province was cut off from the supply of salt as an economic sanction due to the deterioration of relations with Imagawa Ujizane in Suruga province, which has an alliance. Salt is indispensable for sustaining human life and for long-term storage of foods, but it is not possible to obtain salt in Kai province because there is no sea there. Kenshin Uesugi, Sengoku Busho of the neighbor country of Ichigo, who had a hostile relationship with Takeda Shingon, who got to know of this, said, "Stopping supply of salt is the highest of a moral and no braveness. The weapon to take a fight with you is bows and arrows, not rice or salt. I want you to come to my country from now on to get salt. I'll give you as much salt as you want." The letter for the above was sent, and then Shingon obtained the salt. As a token of gratitude, Shingon Takeda sent a great sword, but the hostile relationship continued after that also. However, Shingon Takeda, on his deathbed, left words to his son Katsuyori Takeda, saying, "If something happens, depend on Kenshin and Ichigo."
Takeaki Enomoto and Kiyotaka Kuroda. The Battle of Goryokaku.
In 1853, 2 U.S. Navy warships arrived in Uraga, Yokosuka City, Kanagawa Prefecture, ended peaceful era of Japan that lasted 250 years under the rule of the Edo Shogunate, which was established by Ieyasu Tokugawa in 1603. 14 years later, in 1867, the Edo Shogunate returned the government to the emperor, but the samurai, feeling the gratitude to the Tokugawa family, aimed to regain the government, and then the Civil War, Boshin War, 1868 to 1869, had occurred. The war ended in 1869 with the Battle of Goryukaku in Hokkaido. In this Battle of Goryukaku, Takeaki Enomoto, the commander of the Shogunate army, was an excellent person with experience of studying abroad in the Netherlands and was also the commander of the Shogunate Navy after returning to Japan. Kiyotaka Kuroda, a staff officer of the new government army who knew this, surrounded the Shogunate army that was besieged in Goryukaku, and it decided the majority of the battle. Time, Kuroda repeatedly sent Enomoto letters recommending surrender. However, Enomoto did not accept the recommendation because he decided to fight to the end and die as the samurai seal. Kuroda had no choice but sent a messenger of the final notification to Enomoto, saying, "We will attack from now on." However, Enomoto replies that he is not willing to surrender. Instead, Enomoto handed over a book to the messenger and told him as follows, "Even if I die, this book is necessary for Japan, so I don't want to burn it in the war. Take it back to Kuroda and use it for futures Japan." This book was brought back from the Netherlands by Enomoto, and was a book called Kairitsu Zensho, which was written about international law that almost no Japanese at that time knew. Upon receiving this, Kuroda was impressed by Enomoto's patriotism and very well-educated personality, and sent the messenger again, saying, "If we have to fight, let's fight to our heart's content. Do you have enough ammunition?" However, Enomoto did not change his determination, saying, "I am grateful for the offer, but we have enough ammunition." Against Enomoto's reaction, Kuroda then directly visited to persuade Enomoto with carrying sake barrels and foods. Enomoto, who realized the spirit of Bushido in such repeated actions of Kuroda, accepted the surrender on the condition that his subordinates' lives were guaranteed. Enomoto, who surrendered, was prepared to be sentenced to death, but Kuroda, who understood his excellence, struggled to save Enomoto's life with shaving his hair, and said, "If the Japan's new government kills Enomoto, I will quit the new government and then become a Buddhist priest." Enomoto succeeded in persuading Takamori Saigo, and then Yukichi Fukuzawa agreed with it. After all, Enomoto was imprisoned for 2.5 years despite many calling for strict punishment, and the others were released. After his release, Enomoto served as Russian ambassador and minister in the new government, and worked hard for the new Japan. Shunsaku Kudo. Rescue of enemy soldiers at Battle Sea. On February 28, 1942, during the Battle of the Java Sea, Indonesia, encounter, a Royal Navy destroyer on which Ensign Fale Samuel on board, was attacked and sank at 2 p.m. on March 1. More than 400 soldiers who have escaped from other warships nearby were also drifting. Furthermore, the soldiers who escaped to the sea due to the heavy oil that flowed out of the ships temporarily became blind. They were waiting for a rescue from a nearby Allied Dutch military base, but did not appear at all and drifted for 21 hours. Then what appeared there was the Japanese Navy destroyer Ikazuki. It was a dangerous sea area where a Japanese merchant ship was sunk by torpedoes attacked by an American submarine on the day before. But the decision made by Captain Shunsaku Kudo was rescue enemy soldiers. All of the soldiers except some soldiers working for one gunport only desperately rescue the soldiers drifting. And even if there was someone drifting alone in the distance, the ship was approached and rescued. A total of 422 soldiers were rescued, excluding those who sank into the sea during the rescue and those who died after the rescue. It was about 3 times as many as the 150 crew members of Ikazuki. After the rescue, the oil-stained body was carefully wiped off by the Japanese soldiers, and hot milk, beers, and biscuits were served. Shortly after only the officers were gathered, Captain Kudo appeared, and after a salute, he said in English to them, "You guys fought bravely. I deeply respect Royal Navy. Now, you are honorable guests of the Japan Navy." However, Kudo said this also, "It is foolish for your government to start war against Japan this time." The next day, the rescued British soldiers were handed over to a Dutch hospital ship. After the war, Ensign Fale Samuel worked for Britain, such as working as a diplomat, and earned the title of Sir. In 1996, he published his autobiography, My Lucky Life, and wrote at the beginning of the autobiography, dedicated to the former Imperial Japanese Navy Lieutenant Colonel Shunsaku Kudo. In that process, I thought that what happened in the rescue is a miracle, and I sharply pinched my hand many times thinking that this was a dream, he recalled. In October 2003, 84-year-old Sir Samuel Fale visited Japan. The purpose is, I really wanted to thank Shunsaku Kudo before I die. However, at that time, Kudo's whereabouts were unknown, and Sir Fale could not meet Kudo. Afterwards, it's found out that Kudo had died in 1979. When it turned out in 2008, Sir Fale visited Japan again to visit Kudo's grave. Sir Samuel Fale was much impressed with the Japanese Navy's Bushido, which respects the enemy. However, Kudo's rescue of enemy soldiers is one of the manifestations of Bushido, and it is by no means an exceptional act. 2 days after the start of the Greater East Asia War, on December 10, 1941, the Japan Air Force attacked the state-of-the-art ship Prince of Wales and battleship Repulse belonging to the British Far East Fleet, and both sank. The destroyer Express began to rescue hundreds of soldiers who had escaped from the ship to sea, but the Japanese Air Force did not disturb at all, and on the contrary, to save enemy soldiers' life. The pilots of airplanes waved the hands and indicated position of the enemy soldiers who need rescue. Furthermore, when the destroyer was on the way to Singapore after the rescue operation, the ship was under constant surveillance of the Japanese airplanes from the sky, but the airplanes never attacked at all. Kantaro Suzuki, the last Prime Minister of the Great Empire of Japan. Kantaro Suzuki is a man who assumed Prime Minister of Japan in April 1945. Suzuki learned news that U.S. President Roosevelt died on April 12, 1945, shortly after Suzuki took office. At that time, Japanese defeat in the war was almost sure, and it was a time very shortly after the bombing of Tokyo caused 100,000 civilian deaths on March 10, and bombing to major cities in Japan was still continuing. Upon learning of this news, Suzuki immediately broadcasted the following statement to the world via radio. The predominance of the war of the United States today is due to President Roosevelt's leadership, so I understand that the death of the president is a huge loss to the American people. Here, I would like to express my deep condolences to the American people. However, I do not believe that Roosevelt's death will change America's efforts to continue the war against Japan. We Japanese will fight stronger than ever against the hegemony of the U.S. Meanwhile, in Germany, Hitler has issued a statement regarding Roosevelt's death as if it's swearing. Roosevelt will be a person who instigated the expansion of this war into World War II, and he will be recorded in the history as a stupid president who strengthened Germany's biggest opponent, the Soviet Union. The biggest war criminal Roosevelt in the history has been removed away from this earth. Against this to contrasting condolence, German writer Paul Thomas Mann, who had been in exile in the United States, spoke from California to his homeland Germany on a radio broadcast. In the Oriental country of Japan, chivalry spirit and a sense of human's character still remains. There is still awe for death and awe for the greats. There is a big difference between Japan and Germany. The New York Times on April 15 reported with surprise with the headline, Japanese Premier voices sympathy in response to this unthinkable act of mourning the death of the leader of enemy country. In addition, the BBC in the United Kingdom issued the following statement, praising Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki's spirit of Bushido. And the words are said to have impressed the world during the war. Germans, Japan, an Oriental country, still has a chivalry spirit, and a deep respect and dignity for human death. Comparing with Prime Minister Suzuki's high spirit, you Germans are not ashamed. I hope you learned what Bushido means a little bit. Even Japanese, there is almost no person who can explain what it means perfectly. But it's sure that Japanese people are posterity of samurai and still keeps DNA of samurai in the body. Thank you very much for watching. Next video coming soon. See you.